trip began in Vancouver, vibrant capital city of British Columbia, a city of towering office blocks and hotels. This is where we stayed, the Royal Horizon Hotel on Robson Street. Just a small establishment really, but quite comfortable. With some very smart modern trolley buses regularly appearing, public transport is well catered for in Vancouver. Office blocks were everywhere, with some completely glass-fronted buildings using modern architectural practices. Yet another trolley bus hurries down Robson Street. Vancouver is built on a hill, and looking along some of the streets, you can see ships in the harbour. The roof of one of the government buildings can clearly be seen pointing to the sky. Vancouver is still growing, and here another glass-fronted building towers up into the sky as work continues to complete it. I wonder if that's lunch going up. We will never know. I really like these trolley buses. Attractive, roomy, and really quick off the mark. Of course, you can take an open sightseeing bus if you wish. Another type of bus intrigued me, such as this little red one, and the lady driver seated in black Stetson hat with a red rose on the front. I couldn't resist filming her, and she saw me doing so and gave me a friendly wave as she drove off. However, it is not all buses and office blocks. Stanley Park is a must place to visit. With trees, bushes, plants and flowers of every type. The park covers an enormous area and is a sheer joy to walk through away from the hustle and bustle of the noisy city that is only just a few miles away. The park pavilion really blends in with its surroundings and is a perfect place for a quiet rest, a cup of coffee, and enjoy the surroundings. The park is also famous for its wonderful collection of totem poles, which attracts visitors from around the world. The carvings all depict ways of life from early native Canadian Indians.
Figures carved on a pole, not as the pole itself. Different styles. Depending on the amount of contacts and trade between different groups.
Bordering the park are the Straits of Georgia, and Vancouver Island is on the opposite side, which is just an extension of the city itself. Joining the two land masses is the Lions Gate Suspension Bridge. It was opened in 1938 by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth during their state visit to Vancouver. Yet another plane, this time a float plane, which drones overhead. These planes are widely used in this part of the world. But it was time to leave Vancouver and move on to Steveston. This was to be one of the highlights of the trip, whale watching. But first it was to the outfitters to get kitted out in warm, waterproof gear. This one for the family album. And then down the ramp to our whale watching boat, where the captain welcomed us aboard.
Feel free to move on.
Cruising slowly out to sea gave us an opportunity to see a variety of ships moored alongside.
For any other trash you might have, the waste baskets just through the doors here on.
And then we were off. It was windy and not very warm. The skipper slowed as we approached a large ship attached to a mooring buoy. He had spotted a seal having a good scratch.
Can reach huge sizes. They are the largest sea lion in the world. A bull can be up to 2,000 pounds.
Then we began our whale watching. This whale watching business consists of staring at the sea and cruising around in the hope of seeing one. Sometimes you do catch sight of one, but you have to be quick. The whales come up to breathe and are gone again.
The mother with the youngster, that is, I'm just trying to determine who that is. Oh, for the bird person, there's a common mirror in
The
water
bird
there.
person she referred to is that one of our group was an avid bird watcher. There are other boats all looking for whales, of course, and the skippers talk to each other, repositioning, and then everyone steams over to that particular point.
Oh, that big boy can hold his breath.
Abel's joined them. That looks like maybe Mike pulled up there.
Everyone hopes to see one leap out of the water, and then bingo! Unfortunately, someone got in my way, so I didn't get it falling back in again. So let's have another look.
There's another one over there. That's what we thought perhaps, but they weren't.
Those two boats must have seen something, so we went along with them. And you guessed it, saw more empty sea. It was like this for much of the time. Everyone looking in all directions at once until an excited shout of "over there" gives you a split second to see the whale and hopefully film it. You get a great view from up on the viewing platform, and as the skipper opens the throttles we roar off in the hope of seeing some more whales. With two 500 horsepower Volvo diesels and water jet propulsion, this boat goes along at around 30 knots. This time we were lucky and there were an awful lot of them. This had turned out to be great fun once you got the hang of it all.
Yeah, I think there'll be no problem picking these guys up.
That's okay, I didn't want to disturb you. See see if they're finally gonna go fly somewhere.
Oh. Direkt unter dir hier, direkt am Boot hier. Der ist hier vorne. Boah, Ballon. Hübsch.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm positive now that that's my he's supposed to.
After about a couple of hours, our whale watching adventure was over, and the skipper opened the throttles and headed back to port.
Any other trash you might have, the waste baskets just through the doors here.
The comparative calm of the harbour was in total contrast to the last 2 hours of hectic looking around for whales. After returning our hired outfits back to Bosporus, I took time to browse around Stevenson's Fisherman's Wharf with its attractive little shops and, of course, restaurants. After having lunch there, it was back to pick up our cases at the hotel and board a coach which would take us to Vancouver railway station, ready to board a famous train. After a short wait, we got our first view of Canada's famous train, the Canadian, and its stainless steel cars stretching way back. This was the main reason for coming on the trip, to ride the train, the last of the classic long-distance streamlined trains still operating anywhere in the world today. At its head were 2 powerful diesel-electric locomotives, each of 3,000 horsepower. As the loco crew got ready, I took a look at one of the famous dome cars, whilst another was being washed and cleaned, ready for the trip. Soon after, the famous cry rang out loud and clear, "All aboard!" and it was time to get on the train. Once on our way, I took note of my roomette, as it is called. A large mirror helped in filming it, the comfortable seat pulled down and turned into a bed. In one corner, a wash basin concealed under a little lift-up table with hot and cold taps, and a separate drinking water one. And a comfortable seat covering an electronic push-button vacuum flush loo. But enough of that, I needed to go up into the dome where a welcome aboard treat awaited us.
Very cold winter.
Some delicious canapes and champagne. After the excitement of whale watching and getting on board and finding one's roomette, this was a real and unexpected treat. Soon afterwards, it was time for dinner in the elegant restaurant car. The countryside drifted past the window, and soon after darkness approached as the Canadian travelled on into the night. I needed to get up very early in the morning, so I returned to my roomette where the bed had been made up with 2 comfortable pillows. The blind had been drawn and it was time to climb into bed and get some sleep. Filming with one hand was a little tricky, but it worked. Good night. It was still dark as I made my way up to the dome. As no one else was mad enough to be up at that time in the morning, I had it to myself. The headlights of the locos were clearly visible up front as the Canadian rolled along. A faint light in the sky hinted that the dawn was not too far off. A little later, as we were held by a stop signal, a bright light appeared behind us as a long freight train approached, illuminating the entire interior of the dome. It rumbled past us. This was to be a regular feature, the Canadian having to stop to allow freight trains to pass or overtake. Freight trains make money. On the move again, with the long train stretching out behind, the sky began to turn a beautiful pale blue and salmon pink. The Canadian, headlights still on, rolled on following the course of the mighty Fraser River. The sky was getting brighter all the time as the train, like a giant silver serpent, wound its way along the riverbank. The rear part of the Canadian stretching way back. The beautiful pink colour was beginning to fade now as some of the group made their way up to the dome as we passed over yet another bridge. There were many of these spanning the mighty Fraser River. The Canadian approaches yet another one. On the opposite bank of the river, two locos haul a heavy freight train. Our two locos, without the trace of any exhaust smoke, lean into the curves. Soon after crossing over another bridge, a freight train passes going the opposite way. I also went the opposite way to have a well-earned breakfast.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that should be
After a good start to the day, the Dome was the place to be as we rolled along.
Yeah, isn't it?
Another freight train on the opposite bank. Many of these trains are up to 2 miles long. Another one passes us, going the opposite way. As the morning wore on, blue skies and sunshine were a welcome sight, showing off the ever-changing countryside to its best advantage.
And it produces some soup.
Occasionally we would pass isolated habitation. The ever-present freight trains cause frequent halts.
Now, have you taken
On one occasion, the privately owned and run Rocky Mountaineer train came along and drifted past the windows.
860.
On our way again, and lunch became the next most important event. The Canadian first ran in 1955, covering the 2,800 mile trip from Vancouver to Toronto in 3 days and 4 nights. The snow-capped Rockies were now coming more into view. Our two powerful diesels round yet another bend.
Well, he's not right. He says whistle, tunnel. He's doing exactly everything.
The British one. Oh, yeah. Sorry?
Don't see around once.
As we waited yet again for a freight train, we got a good view of the Athabasca Glacier high up on the mountains.
Do the same through that side window.
Yeah.
You get a clearer picture.
And then through the trees we got a very good view of Mount Robson at 12,972 feet, the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies. This was the last view from the train, as we were shortly due to arrive in Jasper for a 3-day stay. We said goodbye to the 20-car train and made our way to Jasper station, with the tour manager ensuring all other charges had got off and were accounted for. The station, built in 1925, had changed very little. Inside were some interesting old posters made in Dorchester, England, and a map of Canada with important buildings pictured and a logo. Take a good look at this old loco, number 6015.